Hello, my name is Oscar Fire, and that was nearly a voice crack, but it's fine. Everything's fine. I'm perfectly fine. I don't know what you're talking about. My glasses are dirty. I'm going to deal with it. Anyway, hello, my name is Oscar Fire, and today we are talking about the Talismans of Shannara. This cover has literally nothing to do with anything in the book, once again. It is just a generic cover. Don't know. Don't really know why these editions of the book have generic covers on them, especially because there was very nice artwork from the original book covers, but whatever. My mother has copies of those, so that's nice. Anyway, all right, so we're going to talk about the Talismans of Shannara, and like before, we're going to talk about the Heritage of Shannara series as a whole in another video. But I want to talk about Talismans first. I just want to address a few things, really. But I guess first things first. Really enjoyed it. Actually, a super satisfying conclusion. Given that I've been disappointed by things in recent months, weeks, years, Star Wars. I must admit that I was very glad to have been delighted by this rereading of Talismans. It was a very strong conclusion to the series. I think it, generally speaking, brought everything together pretty effectively. There wasn't a lot of, there weren't really I don't think there were any loose threads. I think he actually successfully managed to not have any real loose threads in the plot, which is very nice. You have lots of authors who kind of reach the conclusion of their story and forget to address one or two things, but here, not really. And I was, I was pleasantly surprised by that. I thought that something would have been forgotten, but unless I'm forgetting something, which is entirely plausible, there was nothing here really that left me feeling like, I still want an answer to that. Oh, what happened to this? Why did you forget about this? Things like that. That wasn't really present here, and that was very good. And that's really kind of challenging too, because Terry Brooks set up a lot in the first three books, and this book has all the perspective characters you could want. Parr, it has Cole, it has Ren, it has Morgan, it has Walker Bow. That's 5 characters. It's 5 perspective characters. That's a lot of people. And there's a couple of guest appearances by other perspectives as well, and that's a challenge. It's a challenge to write that, and given that I know what's going to happen with the series, I find myself even more impressed, and possibly even slightly disappointed, that he did such a good job of it all those years ago. This was written 30 years ago, it was 30 years ago. This was published in 93, I think. But, yep, I was right. But it was very much, this was written 30 years ago, and to see kind of where he started and where he ended up was a little bit. But but it was a very satisfying ending. I had some minor, as the book as a whole, I had some minor quibbles about it. I'm just going to talk about the plot specific elements in the story here, and I'm going to talk about broader. I have some issues with the broader story too, but I'm going to talk about those in the other video. But I just want to talk about a couple elements that kind of didn't work for me just because they are. Can you stop? I'm trying to get this to. I don't know what my camera's doing. It's flickering. It's very. Anyway, all right. So the first thing I want to address is his choice of a prologue / chapter 1. I think it was chapter 1 technically, but in that chapter he gives us a viewpoint of Rimmer Dahl, which of course is the main villain, the primary Shadowin, the head of the Shadowin, and gives us a bit of insight into what Rimmer Dahl is planning on doing to the Scions of Shannara. And I don't really know why Terry Brooks does this. It's not really the best decision to make here. We don't, and he starts doing this more and more as time goes on, where he keeps giving us the perspective of the villain, and I'm just constantly in a position of thinking, I don't care what the villain thinks. Show me what the villain is doing from the perspective of the heroes, and that will be sufficient. And I don't know why he chose to do this, because it actually kind of botches a part of the story here. So he basically, it tells us that, all right, he's going to send the 4 horsemen to deal with Walker. He's going to Well, he's going to keep like dealing with Parr and Cole the way he has been, stalking, having Cole subverted by the mirror shroud and trying to persuade Parr to join him, to join him as join him among the Shadowin. And he tells us that he's going to send an unfaithful friend, so in other words, an infiltrator, to deal with Ren. And I'm just thinking, why do we need to know any of that? We already know that he's trying to subvert Parr Almsford, and he's manipulated Cole to do it. And so that doesn't need any sort of hinting at. Once the Four Horsemen, the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, roll up to Paranor's gates, we're going to know what he sent to deal with Walker. And the thing is that with Ren, ambiguity would have served the story so much better. Because when Tib Arne, or however you pronounce his name, when he shows up, it's very obvious he's the infiltrator right off the bat. There's something that's like super wrong. First of all, because we know about it because of Chapter 1. But 2, it's because we already know something about the fact that the Freeborn have sent a scout to look into the reappearance of the elves. We already kind of know that they sent someone, and something about Tib Arne does not fit. I don't think we ever specifically know who they send. We just know they send someone, but there's something about Tib Arne that doesn't match up properly. Because the Freeborn are smarter than that, and you think they would send someone experienced, not some kid. Because we've seen how they've operated. But the thing is that just because he's the only person that shows up to Ren who isn't an elf, that it's like, okay, this obviously is a shadow and infiltrator of some sort, and it doesn't work, again, because this should have been ambiguous. It should have been ambiguous. When he shows up, he should have been more, I don't know, because I've been kind of thinking about how I would actually fix it. And I think the primary way I would fix it, realistically, is, A, ambiguity, and B, make him more helpful, make him more trustworthy. He kind of just shows up a couple of times, and Ren has no real reason to trust him. There's no everyone else is completely suspicious of him, actually. Triss doesn't trust him, Tiger Tai doesn't trust him, Ering Rift doesn't trust him. No one trusts him, and Ren doesn't really either. She just kind of brings him along when he finally betrays and captures her. She just sort of brings him along on a whim, but it's never like a yeah, I trust you in your judgment and your insight. It's like, no, she just sort of brings him along because she's gotten kind of desperate because there's an army that outnumbers her army 10 times and creepers coming along. So yeah, but that sort of thing is not, I think, a solid enough motivation for her to let her guard down so clearly when it's clear that no one really kind of trusts him in the first place. I just think it's funny and weird, that they just kind of that Terry Brooks just kind of lets this part of the element, this part of the plot be so obvious and transparent. I think a much smarter approach to it would have been to have, in addition to having it more ambiguous, is to have it where Tib Arne appears and he helps them. He does something meaningful to help them. He doesn't just tell them that there's an army to the east, there's an army of freeborn and trolls ready to help. But he actually does something to inflict heavy casualties on the Federation and slow them down. I think that would have been very smart because he's a Shadowin. He doesn't give a crap about any of these people. He doesn't care about the normal people of the Federation. It would be entirely, fitting for him to take the it would be entirely fitting for him to take a strategic long view and say, why don't we just sacrifice 5,000 Federation soldiers and make the elves trust me so that when things come back around I can betray Ren Elesadil, very easily. I think that would have been a much smarter approach in terms of storytelling and it would have been a much smarter approach in terms of storytelling and just overall characterization. you know, because he's someone who seems to think himself very clever, but everything he does isn't very clever. It's just that Ren, for some reason, is holding the idiot ball and doesn't really think about anything. But yeah, I just generally think that could have been better handled. And then there's also the matter of Maddie Rowe. Now I'll tell you right now, I love the character of Maddie Rowe. It's funny, when she first appeared, actually, I was a little like hesitant on her, because I'm just like, you know, she came across as vaguely Mary Sue-ish. You know, she's an excellent swordswoman and everything, and she's great at like espionage. You know, it's just listening and so forth. You know, and I thought actually that she was going to be kind of a boring character, but there's just something about her that's super endearing. The way she gets, you know, the way she kind of gets the joy of battle and everything when she's fighting, and the way that she finds a purpose in following Morgan and Damson in their search for you know, Cole and Par Onsford. I think that's like a really satisfying. I think it's really satisfying. You know, just generally speaking, I think she's a very fun character. The thing that's really the problem with her isn't really with her at all. The problem with her is quickening. Because it goes back to my critique of the Druid of Shannara, where I said that I am never convinced by the romance between Morgan and Quickening. Because the problem with their romance is that it's not a very deep one. It's very much a puppy-lovish sort of romance. It doesn't have like the deep feeling and connection that other romances in the series would otherwise have. And it is severely weakened, by that. And Maddie Rowe's presence in the story, in the Talismans of Shannara, is defined by Morgan's relationship to Quickening. That's why I kind of like is weakened by that, because, you know, Maddie doesn't want to do anything, doesn't want to like pursue Morgan, because she sees that Morgan is still in love and heartbroken over Quickening, and she's afraid that she won't be able to compete with her, with his memories of her. And Morgan's just having trouble getting over Quickening, right? But again, that's entirely dependent on me actually believing that Quickening is a serious contender for Morgan's heart, and it wasn't just that they were, you know, again, in a little spot of puppy love. You know, I don't know. I'm just because I wasn't persuaded by that particular romance. Because I'm not persuaded by that particular romance, I have a hard time just thinking, okay, you know, I'm totally down for what's going on here. And I enjoy it. I enjoy the way their little relationship sort of blossoms too, because they're kind of similarly motivated. You know, they both were kind of not doing less than they felt like they could have been or should have been. And when the quest of the Onsfords crosses their path, it gives them purpose. It gives them meaning, and they find a thrill in it, for that matter. So I very much like Maddie Rowe. I like the relationship between Morgan and Maddie Rowe, and I just wish there was a little more impetus for Morgan's motivation to make it work better. There is actually one other issue I have with the book, but I'm actually going to save that for the broader video on the story. And so I'm actually going to end it here. There's not much else I have to say. I mean, I know there's some criticisms, but I critique things because I like them. Because I like them, I want them to be good. If I didn't, it would be a much worse sign if I was apathetic. If I didn't want to critique it, if I didn't want to try and improve it. But it's precisely because I love the Shannara series that I want to like talk about it. I want to like get down into it and think about how it could be better. That becomes purely out of love for the series. So anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. When I return, we are going to talk about not just this book, but the other three as well. So thanks for watching again, And until next time, everybody, stop flickering, please.